with Clay Ballard, our new RST certified instructor who's taking over down here in Orlando for us and doing a great job in learning all the biomechanics of the swing. And he's also going to help us today talk about the lower body movement. And I know for a lot of you golfers, we talk about hip spinners and those types of things that typically are geared more towards the better golfer. But that's obviously not everybody out there. We know we have a lot of golfers who still come over the top and don't really have a good picture of how the lower body works. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And we built a little 2D model here. And it's built kind of like Clay. Maybe we'll call him Clay. Stick figure move here. But basically, it's an oversimplified 2D model from a top-down perspective. Like I said, it's oversimplified. But it's going to show the segments of the body in proportion how they work. And they're color-coded for a reason. So the one piece that I have here at the bottom is green. And this is the starting piece, and it's the smallest piece. The green piece represents the hips. And it's green for a reason. We're going to talk about that in a second. The next piece, proportionately bigger than the green piece, is red, and it's red for a reason. That's the shoulders or the upper torso. And then the yellow piece represents the left arm, and the blue piece represents the golf club. Now they're color-coded for a reason. And Clay, we see a lot of golfers moving these segments in the wrong sequence, and we spend a lot of time talking about sequencing in the golf swing. And this is where people come over the top and they don't sequence things correctly. They're color-coded like this for a reason. What do we typically see the first part moving in the higher handicap golfers?
With the higher handicap golfers, they tend to go ahead and unwind their shoulders right off the bat. They throw their arms from the top, and then that gets the club releasing way too early. So they're kind of throwing the club from the top, coming over the top, hitting a big slice, getting too steep on it. A lot of different problems that are caused with that.
Yeah, exactly. And this is why this is red. Because everybody, especially if you're an over-the-top golfer, your first move is not to move your lower body, but to take your upper body and heave it around. And then, of course, that you're getting the club to fire early and your arms to fire early. So you lose a ton of lag, and that's how you cast it. So we have the hips being green for a very specific reason. The hips can fire. And for most of you golfers who are higher handicap golfers, we want that to happen. We need them to be focused on getting those hips to go first. Now, obviously, a lot of the videos on the website deal with hip spinners, and that's really geared towards a lower handicap player who hasn't learned how to post up and decelerate the hips. They just kind of keep rotating through. But we know through the online groups and the video submissions that many of you out there on the website are still over-the-top guys casting the club and moving things in moving the segments in the wrong sequence. And sequencing is everything in the golf swing. That's how you build effortless power. So let's look at this sequence, how it works in the golf swing. I'm going to go ahead and move Clay here up to the top of the backswing and show you about where everything would be, roughly, in this sequence. So again, this is oversimplified. We don't have any angles. We're just trying to make it a really simple picture. So you can see in this image, the hips have turned about 45 degrees. That's fine. The shoulder's about 90 degrees, maybe even a little bit more. The arm is loaded up across the chest, so it's across the red part here, and then the club is loaded up. So now we have a lot of potential energy. When we started out, we had nothing. There's nothing to hit with. There's no angles, there's no leverage, right? But as we rotate back, now we have some rotational force, and then we also have some levers here. This guy right here is now potential energy. This guy is potential energy. So as those two are working together, we got to get these guys to work and release. So, let me tighten that up real quick. Okay, so now in this position, we have lots of energy, lots of lever, we have lots of force available to us. The key is to unwind that force in the right sequence. That's the whole point of the downswing. We're loading it up to create potential energy. Now we've created these levers, and now we need to unwind them the right way. So, as Clay mentioned earlier, the first thing we typically see is they take the red part. Red means stop. We don't want to defire that red part, so we don't need this to just start unwinding early, because then we're taking our trunk, our lower body, out of the swing. And so what it's going to do is then start to stabilize to support the upper body to keep us from falling on our face, right? So instead, we need the lower part to fire, and then in a minute, the next part of the video is we're going to show you exactly how to move that lower body in the right sequence, and some drills to do it. But let's look at how it works here. So as I start unwinding the green segment first, it's green because we want it to go. As it starts to unwind, notice how all of the segments are moving. Now what are the arms doing at this point?
Very little.
Right? most people do this right from the top, right? They take these segments, they move them out of the wrong sequence. But if we move the hips, the arms are being moved by the lower body. And so we talk about that a lot. You hear sayings, oh, I feel like my arms are falling from the top, or they're relatively passive from the top. When we talk about how the arms work in the downswing, again, that's really geared towards a player whose lower body movement is already working correctly. But that's not everybody. So we want this stuff, we want to maintain these angles later in the downswing, and for the average average higher handicap golfer, we need to maintain those angles as long as humanly possible is what it's going to feel like.
Absolutely. So there's something even called the kinematic sequence of events, which is just the order in which you fire. If you do this very efficiently, you're going to get maximum power. So that's something that we see very few amateurs do, and a lot of the professionals do it very well. So this is very key into getting the maximum amount of power into all your shots.
Yep, exactly. So that's what we want to do, is sequence all of these movements into the right so that everything's delivered at the right point. So now we're going to move the hip segment. I'm not moving anything else, but because they're attached via your muscles and tendons and ligaments, the rest of it's getting moved. As the hips accelerate and then decelerate, because we don't want the hips to keep spinning. That's what we talk about with our higher handicap players. They don't learn to decelerate the hips, and they just keep moving, and then the club inevitably releases late. So if we imagine impact is here, this club's going to release late. There's no release of energy here. So we want the hips to decelerate, and that's what we're going to talk about a lot on this next part of the video, is getting the hips to move correctly at first and then decelerate, because we need to transmit that energy up the chain, up to eventually to the club. So as the hips begin to decelerate, the shoulders start to move a little bit faster. They accelerate a little bit, but not a ton. And that's not something that you're consciously trying to do, right? We don't want to take our shoulders and move them through. We want our hips, once you stretch these muscles, they're going to get pulled around by your obliques and other muscles in your core. That's what we want. Then the shoulders also are going to decelerate. The arm's going to then accelerate off the chest here. And then as it decelerates as well, the club head finally gets a chance to accelerate. So at impact, our segments roughly look like this, where the hips are 30 to 45 degrees open, shoulders are pretty squared up, the left arm and club are forming a straight line. And so we've taken all of those segments and unwound them. And that's what we're trying to do to get the club edge release. So in proportionate wise, you can see that the club is quite a bit longer than my arm in this place. Obviously the reason for that is that the longer the club is, the faster it can be swung. The problem is when everybody keeps, this is obviously a full release at this point, when everybody keeps unwinding their shoulders and then their arm is still draped across their chest and then the club is like this, that doesn't look like we've fully released our energy, right, Clay?
Yeah, exactly. It's still lagging behind, and we usually end up hitting it very thin or to the right.
Yeah, and this is what we see a lot of our better players do. They move their lower body really well, but they don't learn to decelerate the body so that the club can finally accelerate. So when you look at the length of this lever, and you know that at the top you've got your wrist cocked this much, it has a long ways to travel in space. If I grab the end of this club, it's got a long ways to go. And so if I just keep spinning my arms and throwing my arms as hard as I can, it's going to end up like this. And that's what we deal with a lot of better players. So in this next part of the video, we're going to talk about how to get this in alignment and these segments to release at the right angles at the right times so we generate a lot of speed without a lot of effort.